First and foremost, I want to say that I truly appreciate the services that you provide. It's vital to Pennsylvania and our Commonwealth to adequately fund your operations. But with that said, I'd like to get right to the matter, obviously on the top of our minds, and especially the constituents that I represent. I come from an area that's a mix of urban and rural municipalities, but our top municipality probably has 15,000 people. It's Indiana County. And so I'm very concerned as we start talking about this per capita fee, the impact that that's going to have on our local residents, particularly in an era where we're all troubled with property taxes, senior citizens on fixed incomes. I recently received a letter from one of our municipalities that are looking at most likely an increase of $320 per year for each household based on this fee. So my question then is, the rationale behind this per capita fee and the exploration of any other initiatives, combining forces, creating sub-departments perhaps within the sheriff's office, other options in lieu of this fee, and your feedback on that.
Well, first of all, the personnel costs for any state agency are astronomical, usually based on salary and benefits. Our personnel costs are about 77.5% of our overall budget. And 84.1% of that comes from the general governmental operating funds. It plays a significant role in our budget. The funding for some of these things are hard to examine. They're hard to quantify. But we look at the average cost of a trooper on the road being at about $105 per hour, or about $220,000 a year. So that is a very costly number for us. As we get removed from the motor license fund in the next several years in decreasing amounts of between $30 and $40 million, the funding has to come from somewhere. In the big retrospective picture, there are municipalities, especially rural ones, that don't have a lot of residents, and unfortunately would have to pay a fee as well. It's important that we are funded no matter where that funding comes from, and this is one of those particular areas of coming up with a fee. It's a starting point. We don't know if it's the end-all and be-all, but it's a way to start the conversation on trying to fund the Pennsylvania State Police, because so we can keep providing the services that the citizens deserve. There's talk over the years about regionalization, and some people have looked at that. Other departments have closed their doors and closed their businesses. Last year there were 7 municipalities that did away with their agencies. So far this year there's been 2 more added to that list. So it is a funding thing for even the municipalities to maintain their agencies, let alone the state police as well. Do you have anything you want to add to that, perhaps?
As the Colonel said, too, one of the significant burdens that we face is this isn't static, and it's never a status quo kind of thing. The number of municipal departments folding versus those being established, those folding have outpaced those being established by a ratio of 3 to 1. And that creates a very significant burden for us because oftentimes we don't have a sufficient ramp-up time to move staffing and look at incidents and resources. So that becomes particularly burdensome for us with these departments disbanding, and that creates a further strain on our resources which seems to be exacerbated year by year as we look at the number of municipal departments.
Have you considered a service-based fee based on the amount of calls that you have per municipality, anything like that?
We've recently looked at some of those. We are putting some numbers together to come up with an idea. Not only do we work for municipalities without a local police department, we also supplement those that have part-time departments as well. Right. And that number is very costly as well. Sometimes a department will have 40 hours of coverage. We then have to make up for the remaining amount of time. Also, some of the services that we provide to not only go to those agencies, but to those that are full-time agencies as well. We spend a lot of resources and money for specialty services, CERT operations, our laboratory services and fees, and those types of areas. And that goes to anyone within the Commonwealth, as well as some law enforcement federal agencies as well. So we're always looking at different ways to save money. Internally, we've looked at some different things that we've been doing. We also have some ideas, perhaps maybe not necessarily in this type of fee, but other fees that maybe could be attached to certain services or whatever that could bring some of that money in for us. However, I don't know if it would amount to $103 million at this point.
I understand that, and I understand this is a complicated issue, but I do think it's somewhat unfair to burden those municipalities that may not have as much of a need for the service as others. Just something to consider. And I appreciate that you mentioned cost cutting. That was one of my next questions, looking at innovation and how you do reduce some of the expenses, and especially as it seems like the operations are expanding and changing with the digital age. I appreciate that there's an effort to cut some expenses and perhaps look at programs that are outdated or need changed or removed.